Hello again to all my food warriors and welcome back to the channel. It has been a little while since we've had an opportunity to spend some time together, but we are back. We spent a few weeks in Italy, absolutely phenomenal family vacation, spent some time around Rome and toured literally 10 cities in 14 days. It was absolutely fantastic. Spent a lot of time just absorbing the culture, kind of immersing ourselves in it. Spent a lot of time celebrating the bounty of the season in the farmers markets and treating ourselves to some of the specialties of the region, and even trying our hand at cooking a few of them along the way. We're now back and ultimately full of inspiration. Want to celebrate the bounty of the season as well. This is a specialty of Sicily. This is a recipe called the pasta alla Norma. This is not, it's a relatively unusual pasta to some, but it is classically Sicilian, and it is predominantly a vegetable-based pasta with a little bit of meat, as always, just for seasoning. So before we get into our ubiquitous slab of guanciale and our onions and our garlic and our olive oil and our tomatoes and all that good stuff, we're going to start off with the vegetable base for this dish. Now what we have here these are kind of the Asian style eggplants. Normally I use baby eggplants for this dish. Couldn't find baby eggplant, and so a good substitute is the Asian style eggplant. They have very few seeds, they're very low in bitterness, so they bring a good bit of sweetness and creaminess to the dish. We've got some baby zucchini, and we've got some Yukon Gold potatoes. So what I'm going to be using is relatively equal quantities. Again, this is a rustic application, and anybody who watches this channel knows you pay more for that in a restaurant. We're going to be using about 4 of these guys, all relatively the same size, 4 of these baby zucchini, and about 5 of these Yukon Gold potatoes. So by weight, we're looking at roughly the same size. What I'm going to do is, before I throw everything into my pan, we're going to start by browning off and caramelizing the vegetables. This is, again, a very, very unique recipe, classically Sicilian. We're going to get, there we are, some heat under our pan while we start to get these guys cut up. So all I'm going to do with my zucchini here is I'm just going to cut these guys in half. The seeds are relatively small, so no need to yard those out. And all I'm going to do is cut these into, call them 1/8 of an inch slices. I don't want them too thin. I want them to have a little bit of integrity. But what I want to do with these is I want to caramelize them off in a little bit of olive oil. So all we're going to do is just cut these up. We're going to get our pan good and hot, and then we're going to throw these guys in. So I will take care of these zucchini. I will see you in 2 minutes. We are back. Our zucchini is cut up. We've got some heat in our pan. I've had to sub up to a slightly larger pan here. And we want to make sure that we get a good base of olive oil in here. Now the trick to this is we're not going to salt it as we cook it. We are going to salt it after the fact. So a good base of olive oil in here. And no, this is not too much olive oil. There we are. So we will get our zucchini right into the oil, and we will cook these guys till they are beautifully golden brown. These will obviously reduce in volume as they cook. There we are. And so what we're going to do here, very important, we're going to cook one vegetable at a time, because they take different amounts of time to cook. They have different amounts of water in them, and they all caramelize at different speeds, and so we want to make sure that we are getting the most out of every vegetable that we have in here. So we're just going to let this go. We're going to give this about, I'd say, a good 12 to 15 minutes until it's beautifully caramelized, and I will see you in that time. In the meantime, we have our pot of water here that's coming up to the boil. This is a relatively quick pasta once we have all of our component parts ready to go. But in the meantime, we're going to get this heated up while we caramelize our zucchini. I will see you in about 12 to 15 minutes. All right, we are back. As you can see, some beautiful color developing on our zucchini here. These are just about done. I've already sliced up most of my eggplant. So we're just going to give this about 30 more seconds. So just as far as cutting up this eggplant, again, similar to the zucchini, we want to get right under the calyx here. Give this guy a little slice, take that off. We don't need to slice the other end. All we're going to do is cut it right in half. And look how beautifully white this is. Very, very few seeds. That's usually where the bitterness is. And so all we're going to do is we're going to slice these up, again, in about 1/8 of an inch, maybe 1/4 of an inch at the most, thick slices, so that these guys cook beautifully, uniformly. There we are. And there we are. So we will get rid of this, and now we will shut our burner off. With a slotted spoon, we are going to fish out our zucchini here. It helps if we can just tilt the pan. That way, we'll make sure that we don't get any of the excess oil, and we're going to use that oil to now fry and caramelize our eggplant. There we are. Now these are beautifully soft, beautifully sweet. We have not seasoned these at all. No salt, no pepper just yet. We are going to be seasoning these once they go into our sauce. So clearly we've lost a good bit of the water, a good bit of the volume. But what we've done here is we've intensified the flavor of the zucchini. We've caramelized the sugar. And this is now a completely different vegetable than just a typical zucchini. There we are. We'll get our last couple out here. There we go. Boom. Just leave these off to the side to cool. And now we're going to get our temperature back up in our pan. We're going to get our eggplant back in there as well. Now as the eggplant fry, it will look as though they are soaking up the oil. What they soak up, they will eventually give back. Now if we want to minimize that, we want to make sure that our pan is hot, and that way the moisture from the inside of the eggplant, as it turns into steam, will continue to push out, and it won't absorb nearly as much oil. So there we are. We'll just get these guys in. And again, these will probably take a little bit less time, probably 10 to 12 minutes or so. By the time these caramelize, I'm going to get started on my potatoes, and I will see you in about 10 minutes. All right, we are back, and our eggplant are absolutely gorgeous. Beautifully caramelized, slightly crispy around the edges, beautifully sweet. And again, the trick here, no salt. If you salt them, they get watery, they get droopy, they lose their character, and they don't quite taste the same. So we're just going to shut the heat off here for a second. Again, we're going to move this stuff out of the way while we fish these guys out. There we are. Make sure we drain them. Oh, look at that. Beautiful color. There we are, and I've started cutting up my potatoes here, and yes, this is a bit of an event here, but I promise you this pasta is worth it. Now, when I've had this in the past, most traditional to this dish is the eggplant. I've had it with eggplant and potatoes. My little addition today is with some zucchini, and the reason being is I love caramelized zucchini. They bring a great deal of sweetness to the party, and anytime that we can add some more vegetables to a dish to lighten it up and to increase that flavor spectrum, we will actually absolutely do that. So for all of you out there who are cooking for difficult kids, this is how you get some veggies in them. So we're going to put the heat back up here. Again, all I'm doing with my potato is I'm cutting it into, again, 1/8 inch slices. There we are. Nothing fancy. Boom. I have not soaked these in water. I want that surface starch because that is what will help caramelize. and give it that beautiful color. But with all of these vegetables, what we're looking for is golden brown and delicious, not black and carbonized. We want to bring those sugars out, make them all that they can be, and that way they will add sweetness and character to our vegetables. Now, our potatoes are the only vegetable that I'm going to salt and pepper while I'm frying them here. So just, again, a little pinch of salt, a little pinch of pepper. This is freshly cracked black pepper. There we are. And that's it. We'll give these guys a little toss in the oil. And these guys will go, again, for another 10 to 12 minutes or so until they start to caramelize beautifully. So I will see you in about 10 to 12 minutes. We are back. Our potatoes are just off the heat. We're going to give these guys a little taste. And now we're going to get right to the sauce. So we're going to start off, as we always do, a couple of good slices of our guanciale. Now in this application you can use pancetta as well. Guanciale is the salted and air dried and cured jowl of the pig, and pancetta is the salted and air cured belly of the pig. Same as bacon, just not smoked, just salt cured and air dried. And what we're going to do is just take off a little bit of this rind here at the bottom, which we don't want. There we are. And what we're doing here is, this is not used as a protein in this application. This is very much just used for seasoning. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to cut this up into little matchsticks. And all we want is the fat to render from our guanciale, and these little matchsticks to become beautifully crispy. And every once in a while we're going to get one of these little flavor bombs in there right alongside our beautifully caramelized vegetables. There we are. So this really isn't a lot by weight. Literally 3 slices, about 1/4 of an inch thick, cut up into these little matchsticks. That's all we want. So we have a little bit of residual olive oil in the bottom of our pan. That's all we want. And that will be enough to start the fat rendering from our guanciale. So what I'm going to do now is just get the heat on. And there we are. We're going to start these guys rendering off. These will go for about 2 or 3 minutes until the fat starts to render out and they get beautifully crispy. In the meantime, we're going to salt our pasta water. I'm going to bring this guy back up to temperature. There we are. So what I have here is some sea salt, and I'm going to give this a few good pinches. There we are. And one more. There we are. All right. Now we're going to let that guy come back up to the boil. In the meantime, I will let this go for another 2 or 3 minutes. When our guanciale is beautifully crispy, I will see you in about 2 minutes time. All right, our guanciale is starting to crisp up beautifully. We're going to start with the base of our vegetables here. So we've got 1 large white onion, and we're just going to cut this up into a medium-sized dice, nothing too fancy. We want to keep this rustic. There we are. And just give this last piece of slice. Just stir this around here. There we are. We'll turn the heat down just so that we don't burn our guanciale. This is literally right where we want it. beautifully crispy. The fat is rendering out, and there's as much culinary currency in that fat as there is in the meat here. This is what's going to flavor our sauce, and this is what will transport us to the shores of Sicily. All right. Other half of our onion. There we are. So now we will get our onion in with our guanciale here. We'll just slide this right off the board. There we are. Now that we have some moisture from the onion in the pan, we can turn the heat back up. There we are. All right, and we will give this guy a little pinch of salt and pepper. There we are. And we will get this going. So now that we have our water just about coming up to the boil, I'm just going to throw the rest of my vegetables into my skillet here, and then we will get our pasta in, and that should take no more than about 10 minutes or so until it's fully cooked. So we want to be a little bit mindful of the salt. We do have some salt from our guanciale. We have a few cloves of garlic here as well. Now we're gonna be using about 750 grams of pasta, which is about a batch and a half for us, because we do want some leftovers for the week when we are on the field and we get home late. And so we're just gonna crush this garlic. One of these cloves is kind of small, and so we'll call this 3.5 cloves. There we are. If we were going to use a typical package, about 500 grams of dry pasta, 2 cloves of garlic would be more than enough. There we are. So we're just going to run our knife through it very quickly, and we will put this right into our pan as well, but not before we add one of our chilies right off to the vine. We have an abundance of chilies out in the garden, and so there's absolutely no reason why we would deviate from tradition and add a chili into this recipe here. There we are. So we will get, I can smell that. It's going to give it a nice little kick. There we are. So I'm just going to give this a little bit of a wipe down. I will see you in 1 minute. All right, we are back. Our onions are sweating down beautifully. We don't want a whole lot of color on these. We just want them to sweat down. And now we are going to get our tomatoes ready. For this amount of pasta, I'm going to be using 2 28-ounce cans of plump tomatoes. You could use passata for this as well, and I thought about using, the tomatoes that we make, and we can every couple of years, but I want to make this and keep this as rustic as possible, and so I do want a little bit of that tomato pulp in there, just to try and keep the recipe as authentic as possible. There we are. Make sure we get all of that in there. There we are. Second one. There we are. And let's make sure we scrape all of that in there as well. I'm going to rinse these out with a little bit of water as well, just to make sure we get every little bit. There we are. So I'm going to turn the heat down for a sec. And what I'm going to be doing is going in there with my impeccably clean hands and just give these a squeeze. Be gentle. Don't get too zealous with this or you're going to be wearing half of it. All we want to do is rupture those tomatoes and make sure that we have these beautiful ribbons of pulp swimming in the tomato coulis that's in here. There we are. There we are. So this way, even if we don't have something like passata kicking around the house, but we have a can of good quality plum tomatoes packed in passata, maybe with a basil leaf, we can still make this dish. So we're just going to make sure that we pour all of this right in there. There we are. I'm going to scrape all of this down. I don't want to lose any of this at all. There we are. So this is the base of our sauce. We're going to let this go for a few minutes just to thicken up before we add our final ingredients. So I will see you in about 2 minutes. All right, we've got our sauce just about coming up to the boil. I've got here about a good 5 or 6 ounces of a good dry white wine. This one here happens to be an Orvieto. All I want to do is just swirl this around in these cans as a means of cleaning these out. Make sure I get every last little bit. There we are. And we're just going to add this directly to our sauce. So now we're going to let the alcohol evaporate here. And as that happens, we're going to add our pasta. This is 750 grams of a good organic. These are pinne rigate. These are going to go for about 10 minutes to be beautifully al dente. I'm just going to pour these right in our pot of boiling water. We're going to start our timer and we're going to get right in there and give these guys a stir. So now in the next 10 minutes our sauce will tighten up beautifully. The last thing we're going to do is just test for seasoning. A little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, and we're going to add a little bit of fresh basil. That's it. Right before we add our vegetables, right at the end, to maintain the character and integrity of those vegetables. So we are literally about 10 minutes away from going to the plate. So I will see you in about 10 minutes time. We are about 30 seconds away from our pasta being cooked. And so we have a beautiful bunch of basil here that I just picked from the garden. We're just going to run our knife through this to bring that flavor of the garden right into the pan. There we are. We're not going to be fancy about this. Remember, we are keeping it rustic, consistent with the spirit of the dish. I'm going to go one more time. There we are. Oh, the smell. The smell is fantastic. There we are. And we know we have a beautifully sharp knife when our board stays white and all that chlorophyll stays in the leaf. There we are. So we're going to give this just one quick stir before we start adding our vegetables in, and we go with one final adjustment of seasoning. There we are. Oh. So what we're going to do now is we are going to start with our zucchini. We're going to get these right in there. There we are. Just stir these around. Next we have our eggplant. There we are. Give these a quick stir just to get them in there. Oh, absolutely gorgeous. And last, we have our potatoes. There we are. Make sure these guys aren't stuck together and that we can get these. It's going to be interesting to see how we get the pasta in this pan. All right. We'll give this a quick stir. And there we go. One final taste. Need a little bit of pepper. And we need quite a bit of salt. Because our tomatoes were salted and our vegetables were salted, with the exception of the potatoes. And so we want to make sure that we bring all of this together. There we are. There we are. And now for our pasta, we'll just cut the heat. And there we go. Just allow that to drain for a couple of seconds. And we'll give this one final taste. That's good. That's good. All right. Right now, time to add everything to the dish here. There we are. One final drain. There we are. This should be about all that this pan can hold. There we are. Get these two guys, two escapees, back in the pool. And we will, as we do with all of our pastas, allow this to come together for the last 30 seconds right in the pan. Get in there. There we are. So I will just give this a quick stir. I will get my serving spoon out and I will see you in 1 minute. And we are there. I can't even begin to describe the smell in the kitchen. It's just one of these deep, hearty aromas that this time of the year, cool evenings, this is what the body craves. And so, we begin. Get ourselves a little portion of our pasta alla Norma. Get right down into, look at that. Look at that, a little bit of everything. Oh. There we are. Come on. Come on. There we are. Now, tell me who would turn down a plate of that? Who in their right mind would turn down a plate of that? Look at that. We're going to finish this, as we always do, with a little bit of freshly grated Parmigiano Reggiano. If we were looking to be a little bit more traditional, Pecorino would be, I believe, the cheese of choice, certainly in the southern regions of Italy, and Sicily would be no exception. And we're just going to give this, this is freshly grated cheese. The aroma is absolutely spectacular. We're just going to work all of that in there. A little piece of potato there, a little bit of eggplant. That zucchini's hiding, but we will flush him out of his hole. It's so different. It's so different from any other typical pasta recipe that I guarantee you've ever had. The double starch works. You wouldn't think it does? It does. It's absolutely fantastic. The zucchini, the eggplant, give it a little bit of lightness, a little bit of spice from the chili, but that potato and the pasta, fantastic combination. I don't know who Norma is, but I gotta be honest, I like the way she rolls. If this is what she brings to the table, any day of the week. I do hope you try this. As always, do like and subscribe. Do share the content, as that is absolutely what this channel is all about. And this is Coach Joe saying I will see you on the next one.